Amanda Torres loved her job as a flight attendant. Even after 9 years of early mornings, time zone changes, and dealing with difficult passengers, there was something magical about being part of people's journeys. Families going on vacation, business people heading to important meetings, people visiting loved ones. Amanda felt privileged to be even a small part of their stories. Delta Flight 284-7 from Seattle to Atlanta was a typical Tuesday afternoon departure. The Boeing 737 had 146 passengers, mostly business travelers and a few families. Amanda worked the aft cabin with her colleague Jason Martinez, while lead flight attendant Carla Jenkins and another crew member covered first class and the forward cabin. During pre-flight checks, Amanda scanned the passengers as they boarded, a habit she'd developed over years of flying. Most were the usual mix: people in business attire typing on laptops, tourists in casual clothes, a few families with children. In row 14, she noticed a little girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting in the window seat, 14A, next to a middle-aged man in the middle seat, 14B. The aisle seat, 14C, was empty. The girl had dark hair in a ponytail, wore a pink jacket, and clutched a small stuffed elephant. She looked scared, her eyes wide and darting around nervously. The man beside her appeared to be in his early 40s, casually dressed in khakis and a polo shirt. He had a pleasant, unremarkable face, the kind of person you'd pass on the street without a second glance. He was reading something on his phone, occasionally speaking to the girl in what seemed like reassuring tones. Amanda assumed they were father and daughter. The girl was probably a nervous flyer. Nothing seemed unusual enough to warrant concern, though something about the girl's body language nagged at Amanda. The child was pressed against the window, creating as much distance as possible from the man beside her. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" Amanda asked pleasantly, pausing at their row. The man smiled. "We're fine, thank you. My daughter's a little nervous about flying, first time." The girl didn't respond, just stared at Amanda with those wide, frightened eyes. Amanda smiled at her. "Flying is actually very safe, sweetheart. There's nothing to worry about." Still no response. The girl looked like she wanted to say something but glanced at the man and stayed silent. "She's shy," the man explained. "Doesn't talk much to strangers." Amanda nodded and moved on, though the interaction left her slightly unsettled. Something about the dynamic felt off, but she couldn't pinpoint what. The girl's fear seemed more than just nervousness about flying. It was deeper, more visceral. The flight departed on time, climbing through the cloudy Seattle afternoon sky toward their cruising altitude of 37,000 feet. The cabin service began. Drinks, snacks, the usual routine Amanda could perform in her sleep. About 90 minutes into the flight, as they crossed over Montana, the aircraft hit unexpected severe turbulence. The seatbelt sign illuminated, and the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, please be seated immediately." Amanda had just finished serving drinks to row 18 when the plane dropped suddenly, causing passengers to gasp. She quickly stowed her cart and strapped into the jump seat in the aft galley, her heart racing. Even after 9 years, severe turbulence still unnerved her. The aircraft bucked and shuddered, dropping and rising unpredictably. The turbulence lasted about 8 minutes. Not long, but intense enough that several passengers looked genuinely frightened. Amanda could hear a baby crying, someone praying quietly, the nervous murmurs of passengers trying to comfort each other. When the turbulence finally eased and the captain announced it was safe for flight attendants to move about the cabin, Amanda unbuckled and stood to check on passengers. She walked through the aft cabin, asking if everyone was okay, retrieving items that had fallen from overhead bins, offering reassurance. As she approached row 14, the little girl with the stuffed elephant reached out and touched Amanda's arm. Amanda stopped, and the girl leaned toward her, gesturing for Amanda to come closer. Amanda bent down, bringing her ear near the girl's mouth. The man in 14B was looking out the window, distracted. In a barely audible whisper, the girl said, "The man next to me isn't my daddy. He took me from the park 3 days ago. His name is Robert. Please help me. Please. I want my mommy." Amanda's entire body went cold. She straightened up slowly, forcing her face to remain neutral even though her heart was pounding. She looked at the girl, whose eyes were pleading desperately, then at the man, Robert, who turned and smiled at her pleasantly. "Everything okay?" Robert asked. Amanda's training kicked in. She smiled back, keeping her voice light and casual. "Yes, just checking on passengers after that rough patch. Can I get either of you anything?" "We're fine," Robert said. "Weren't we, Sophie?" The girl, Sophie, nodded slightly, shrinking back toward the window. "Okay, well, just press the call button if you need anything," Amanda said, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the adrenaline surging through her system. She walked calmly toward the galley, forcing herself not to run, not to do anything that might alert Robert that something was wrong. The moment she was out of his sightline, she grabbed Jason's arm. "I need you to cover the cabin. Don't go near row 14. I need to talk to Carla immediately." Jason saw the look on Amanda's face and didn't ask questions. Go. Amanda moved quickly to the forward galley where Carla was restocking items. Carla, we have an emergency situation. I need to talk to you and the captain right now. Privately. Carla recognized the urgency in Amanda's voice. What's wrong? Not here. We need to speak to the captain. Carla knocked on the cockpit door and used the intercom to identify herself. The door opened and Captain Steve Morrison appeared, concerned by the unusual request. What's going on? Amanda glanced around to make sure no passengers could hear. Captain, I believe we have a child abduction in progress on this aircraft. A 7-year-old girl in 14A just told me the man in 14B isn't her father. She said he took her from a park 3 days ago. She asked me for help. Captain Morrison's expression became grim. Are you certain about this? I'm certain that's what she told me. She seemed genuinely terrified. She used the man's first name Robert, not Dad, or any family term. She said she wants her mommy. Captain, I've been doing this for 9 years. Kids who are nervous about flying don't whisper that a stranger kidnapped them. Morrison nodded. Okay, we're 90 minutes from Atlanta. We need to handle this carefully. If this man is a kidnapper and he realizes we know, he might become violent or harm the child. We need to confirm the situation without alerting him. He turned to Carla. Get me the passenger manifest. I want names for row 14. Carla accessed the flight manifest on her tablet. Row 14A is listed as Sophie Davidson, age 7. Row 14B is Robert Davidson. Traveling together, booked on the same reservation. Tickets were purchased 2 days ago with a credit card in Robert Davidson's name. So officially they're traveling as father and daughter, Morrison said. But the girl told Amanda he kidnapped her. We need more information. I can try to speak with the girl privately, Amanda suggested. Maybe take her to the lavatory. Ask her questions away from him. Too risky, Morrison said. If Davidson is a kidnapper, he won't let the girl out of his sight. If we try to separate them, he'll know something's wrong. What if I just engage them in conversation? Try to get more information without being obvious. Morrison considered this. Be very careful. Don't do anything that makes him suspicious. I'm going to contact Atlanta ATC and have them alert FBI and airport police. We'll have law enforcement waiting when we land. But we need to keep this situation stable until then. Amanda returned to the aft cabin, her mind racing. She had to appear normal, had to act like everything was fine, all while knowing she might be dealing with a child predator who'd kidnapped a 7-year-old. She approached row 14 with her beverage cart, offering refreshments. Can I get you anything to drink? Soda, juice, water? Apple juice for Sophie, Robert said, and a coffee for me, black. Amanda poured the drinks, using the opportunity to observe them more carefully. Sophie sat rigid, not relaxed like a child traveling with a parent. She didn't interact with Robert at all. No chatter, no questions, no comfortable family dynamic. Her body language screamed fear and discomfort. Are you folks heading to Atlanta for vacation? Amanda asked conversationally. Visiting family, Robert said smoothly. Sophie's going to see her grandparents. Sophie's head snapped toward Robert, a flash of something. Confusion? Fear? Crossing her face before she looked down at her hands. That'll be nice, Amanda said, watching Sophie's reaction. Do you see your grandparents often, Sophie? Before Sophie could respond, Robert answered for her. Not as often as we'd like. Long distance, you know, but we're excited for this visit. Sophie said nothing, just gripped her stuffed elephant tighter. Amanda handed them their drinks and moved on, her suspicions now certainties. The girl's body language, her earlier whispered plea, her reaction to Robert's lies about visiting grandparents, everything pointed to this being exactly what Sophie had said, a kidnapping. Captain Morrison contacted Atlanta Air Traffic Control through secure channels. Atlanta Center, Delta 2847, we have a potential situation on board. Possible child abduction. Need FBI and law enforcement to meet aircraft upon arrival. The controller responded immediately. Delta 2847, confirm you have a suspected child abduction in progress. Affirmative. Flight attendant reports 7-year-old female passenger disclosed she was taken by male passenger traveling with her. Situation is stable, but we need law enforcement response on arrival. Copy Delta 2847. I'm alerting FBI and airport police now. Can you provide description of suspect and child? Morrison relayed the information Amanda had provided. Within minutes, wheels were in motion on the ground. FBI Special Agent Marcus Chen from the Crimes Against Children Unit was contacted. He was already at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, working another case. Airport police were mobilized. The gate area was being secured. On the aircraft, Amanda consulted with Carla and the captain about how to handle the next 75 minutes until landing. They decided Amanda would continue monitoring row 14 subtly while maintaining normal cabin service. Nothing could appear unusual that might alert Robert Davidson. Amanda passed by row 14 multiple times, each observation adding to her certainty. Sophie never smiled, never engaged with Robert voluntarily, flinched when he touched her arm. Robert, meanwhile, seemed overly attentive in a controlling way, constantly checking on Sophie, speaking for her, not allowing her to interact with others. During one pass, Amanda noticed Sophie had drawn something on the napkin from her apple juice. When Robert went to the lavatory, instructing Sophie not to move, not to talk to anyone, Amanda quickly approached. Hi, Sophie, Amanda said quietly. Are you okay? Sophie looked up, eyes filled with terror and hope. Did you believe me? About him not being my dad? I believed you completely, Amanda whispered. Can you tell me your real name? Sophie Martinez. I'm 7.
I live in Seattle with my mom and my abuela. Robert took me when I was playing at the park. He said if I told anyone or tried to get help, he'd hurt my mom and grandma. But I'm so scared. I want to go home. You're so brave, Sophie. We're going to help you. When we land, there will be police officers waiting. But until then, I need you to pretend everything is normal. Don't let Robert know you told me anything. Can you do that? Sophie nodded, tears streaming down her face. Promise you'll help me? I promise. You're going to be safe. Amanda quickly returned to the galley. As Robert emerged from the lavatory, she'd confirmed it. This was definitely an abduction. A little girl named Sophie Martinez had been taken from a park in Seattle and was being transported across the country by her kidnapper. Amanda immediately briefed the captain on this new information. Morrison relayed it to Atlanta ATC, who passed it to FBI agent Chen. Chen ran the name Sophie Martinez through the FBI's database. What he found confirmed their worst fears. Sophie Martinez, age 7, had been reported missing from a Seattle park 3 days ago. Her mother, Isabel Martinez, had frantically reported that Sophie had disappeared while playing on the swings. There'd been witness reports of a man talking to Sophie shortly before she vanished, but no solid leads. An Amber Alert had been issued but had so far produced no viable tips. And now, 3 days later, Sophie was on a flight to Atlanta with her abductor. This is confirmed kidnapping, Chen told the airport police commander. The child is Sophie Martinez, reported missing from Seattle 3 days ago. Suspect is traveling as Robert Davidson, likely a fake name. We need to arrest him the moment that plane lands, but we have to be careful. We don't know if he's armed, and the child's safety is paramount. They began planning the arrest. FBI agents and police would be positioned throughout the gate area, disguised as airport personnel and travelers. The moment the aircraft door opened, they'd board under the pretense of routine security, identify Davidson, and extract him from the aircraft while securing Sophie's safety. This has to be smooth, Chen emphasized. If Davidson realizes what's happening and has any chance to harm the child, we've failed. The flight crew needs to keep this situation calm until we can take control. As Flight 2847 began its descent into Atlanta, Amanda felt her anxiety increasing. 75 minutes had felt like hours. She'd maintained her professional facade, serving drinks and snacks, answering call buttons, all while knowing there was a kidnapped child and her abductor sitting in row 14. Sophie had been remarkably brave, maintaining the pretense that everything was normal. But Amanda could see the toll it was taking. The little girl was pale, trembling, on the verge of breaking down. Every time Robert spoke to her or touched her, Sophie flinched. Robert, for his part, seemed calm and unconcerned. He read a book, watched part of a movie, made small talk with the passenger across the aisle. He appeared to be exactly what he was pretending to be, a father traveling with his young daughter. If Sophie hadn't whispered her desperate plea during the turbulence, Robert might have walked off this plane and disappeared with her, and no one would have known. Amanda wondered how many other children had been trafficked or abducted on flights, their silent pleas unheard or ignored. How many flight attendants had noticed something odd but dismissed it? The thought made her sick. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. Amanda strapped into her jump seat, going through her landing checklist automatically while her mind raced. In about 15 minutes they'd be on the ground. FBI would board, Robert would be arrested, Sophie would be safe and reunited with her mother, unless something went wrong. The aircraft touched down smoothly and taxied toward the gate. Amanda could see emergency vehicles positioned discreetly in the distance, FBI and police ready to respond if needed. When the plane reached the gate, Captain Morrison's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have a brief delay before we can deplane. Airport authorities need to board the aircraft first for a routine matter. This won't take long. Thank you for your patience. Passengers grumbled. No one liked delays, but most stayed seated. Amanda saw Robert shift uncomfortably. He looked toward the front of the aircraft, then around the cabin, his relaxed demeanor slipping slightly. Was he suspicious? Had he sensed something was wrong? The aircraft door opened, and FBI agent Marcus Chen boarded, along with 2 other agents and several airport police officers. They were dressed in plain clothes or security uniforms, nothing obviously screaming FBI. Chen approached the forward galley and spoke quietly with Captain Morrison and Carla Jenkins. Morrison pointed toward row 14. Chen moved down the aisle casually, as if performing a routine security check. He stopped at row 14 and smiled pleasantly at Robert. Sir, could you come with me for a moment? Just a routine security verification. Won't take but a minute. Robert's face tightened. What's this about? I haven't done anything wrong. Just a routine matter, sir. If you could step into the aisle, please. Robert looked at Sophie, then back at Chen. His eyes darted toward the emergency exit rows, calculating. Could he grab Sophie and run? Create a hostage situation? Chen saw the calculation, and his hand moved subtly toward his concealed weapon. 2 more agents moved into position, blocking the aisle. Sir, please stand up and step into the aisle. Don't make this difficult. Robert's jaw clenched. He looked at Sophie one more time, and in that look, Amanda saw pure malice. Whatever Robert had planned for Sophie, it was evil, and he was furious that his plan was being thwarted. Sophie, sweetie, we need you to stay in your seat for just a moment, Chen said gently to the little girl. You're safe. These officers are here to help you. Robert stood slowly, his hands visible. The moment he was in the aisle, away from Sophie, agents moved in. They grabbed his arms, cuffed him quickly, and began walking him toward the front of the aircraft. This is a mistake, Robert shouted. That's my daughter. You can't do this, sir. You need to remain silent, Chen said. You're under arrest for suspicion of kidnapping. I didn't kidnap anyone. Sophie, tell them I'm your father. Sophie, still in her seat, looked at the man who'd terrorized her for 3 days and said clearly, you're not my dad. You took me. I want my mom. Robert's face contorted with rage as agents removed him from the aircraft. Passengers watched in shocked silence, some pulling out phones to record, others whispering about what they'd just witnessed. Chen returned to row 14 and knelt beside Sophie. Hi Sophie, I'm Agent Chen with the FBI. You're safe now. That man can't hurt you anymore. We're going to take you to see your mom very soon. Is that okay? Sophie burst into tears, nodding frantically. Is my mommy really here? Is she okay? He said he heard her. Your mom is fine. She's been looking for you. She's on her way here right now. You're going to see her in just a little while. Amanda approached, tears in her own eyes. Sophie, you were so brave. You asked for help, and we were able to save you. Sophie reached for Amanda, who hugged the little girl as she sobbed. I was so scared. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Thank you for believing me. I'll always believe you, sweetheart. Always. Sophie was escorted off the aircraft by Agent Chen and victim advocate specialists. She was taken to a secure area of the airport where she'd be medically evaluated, interviewed gently by trained professionals, and reunited with her mother. Isabel Martinez had been contacted by FBI the moment they'd confirmed Sophie was on the flight. Isabel had been hysterical with relief. For 3 days, she'd lived a mother's worst nightmare, not knowing if her daughter was dead or alive, blaming herself for the moment she'd looked away at the park. When Isabel learned Sophie was safe and would be returned to her within hours, she'd collapsed sobbing. The FBI arranged for her and Sophie's grandmother to be flown immediately to Atlanta on an emergency basis. Meanwhile, Robert Davidson, his real name was Robert Turner, was taken into FBI custody and interrogated. Initially, he maintained that Sophie was his daughter, and this was all a misunderstanding. But faced with Sophie's statement, witness reports from the park abduction, and his own record, he had 2 prior arrests for child exploitation. Turner eventually stopped denying. How did you choose Sophie? Agent Chen asked during interrogation. Turner smirked. She was alone at the park. Just for a minute. Mother was distracted. Sophie was friendly, trusting. I told her I needed help finding my lost puppy. She came with me. Easy. The casual way Turner described abducting a child made Chen's blood boil, but he kept his professional composure. What were your plans for her in Atlanta? Turner's smirk faded. I want a lawyer, but investigators would eventually piece together Turner's intent. He was connected to a child exploitation network that trafficked children for sexual abuse and pornography. Sophie had been abducted to be sold to this network. If she'd made it off that plane with Turner, she likely would have disappeared into a nightmare of exploitation and abuse. Amanda's split-second decision to believe a 7-year-old's whispered plea had saved Sophie from that fate. Back at the secure area of the airport, Sophie underwent medical examination. She had no serious physical injuries. Turner apparently hadn't sexually assaulted her during the 3 days he'd held her, likely saving that for after he'd delivered her to his network. But she was malnourished, dehydrated, and psychologically traumatized. Sophie has been through tremendous trauma, the pediatrician told Agent Chen. Being abducted, held for 3 days by a stranger, threatened, transported across the country, that's going to have lasting psychological effects. She'll need extensive therapy, but physically she'll recover, and mentally, with proper support, she can heal. Several hours after landing, Isabel Martinez and Sophie's grandmother Rosa were escorted to the secure area where Sophie was waiting. The moment Sophie saw her mother, she screamed "Mommy," and ran into Isabel's arms. Isabel collapsed to her knees, sobbing, holding her daughter, unable to speak through her tears. Rosa wrapped her arms around both of them, all 3 crying together. Misha, Misha, my baby. Isabel kept repeating. I thought I lost you. I thought you were gone forever. I was so scared, Mommy, Sophie sobbed. But I remembered you said if I'm ever in trouble, ask a grown-up for help. So I told the flight attendant lady when she came close, and she helped me. You were so smart, mi amor. So brave. I'm so proud of you. They held each other for long minutes, not caring that FBI agents and airport staff were watching, not caring about anything except being together again. Agent Chen finally approached gently. Mrs. Martinez, I'm Special Agent Chen. I'm so glad we could bring Sophie home to you. I need to inform you about next steps. Sophie will need to be interviewed. There will be medical and psychological evaluations, and eventually trial proceedings. But right now, the important thing is you're together, and Sophie is safe. Thank you, Isabel said, tears still streaming. Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you to everyone who helped bring her home. There's someone else who wants to see Sophie, Chen said. The flight attendant who Sophie told about the kidnapping. Her name is Amanda Torres. She'd like to meet you if that's okay. Yes, please. I want to thank her. Amanda was brought to the secure area, still in her Delta uniform, having stayed at the airport after her flight rather than going home. She needed to see that Sophie was truly safe. When Sophie saw Amanda, she ran to her and hugged her legs. Miss Amanda, this is my real mommy. You helped me find her. Amanda knelt and hugged Sophie. I'm so happy you're with your mom again, sweetheart. You were so brave. Isabel approached, overcome with emotion. You saved my daughter's life. How can I ever thank you? Sophie saved herself by being brave enough to ask for help, Amanda said. I just listened and took action, but I'm so grateful I was there for her. If you hadn't believed her, if you hadn't called the FBI, that monster would have taken my baby, and I never would have seen her again, Isabel said, crying. You gave me my daughter back. You gave me back my life. The two women embraced, both crying, united by a shared understanding of what had almost been lost and what had been saved.
Robert Turner's arrest opened a major FBI investigation into the child exploitation network he was connected to. His phone and computer contained evidence linking him to other predators involved in trafficking and abusing children. Turner was part of a network that's been operating for at least 5 years, Agent Chen told his superiors. They identify vulnerable children, abduct them through various methods, then distribute them to buyers who pay for access to sexually exploit them. Turner's role was acquisition. He abducted children and transported them to central locations where other network members took over. The investigation identified at least 12 other children who'd been abducted by this network over 5 years. Some had been recovered in previous unrelated operations. Others remained missing, their whereabouts unknown, their fates uncertain but likely tragic. Sophie Martinez is the lucky one, Chen said grimly. She was only with Turner for 3 days before Amanda Torres recognized something was wrong and we could intervene. Other children weren't so lucky. Some were held for months or years before being recovered. Some we'll probably never find. The FBI launched a multi-state operation targeting the network. Over the following months, they arrested 15 individuals, abductors like Turner, facilitators who provided safe houses, and buyers who paid to abuse the children. Raids rescued 4 children who were currently being held and exploited. Turner, facing overwhelming evidence and potential death penalty charges, agreed to cooperate in exchange for life in prison rather than execution. He provided detailed information about the network's operations, helping FBI dismantle it completely. Turner's cooperation has been valuable, Chen acknowledged, but it doesn't excuse what he did or planned to do. He abducted a 7-year-old and intended to deliver her into horrific abuse. He deserves every day of the life sentence he's receiving. The investigation also revealed how Turner had identified and selected Sophie. He'd spent weeks surveilling parks in Seattle, identifying children who were occasionally unsupervised, learning their routines, finding the perfect moment to approach. This wasn't opportunistic, it was methodical, Chen explained to Isabel Martinez during a briefing about the case. Turner specifically targeted Sophie because he observed that she sometimes played alone while you were nearby but distracted. He planned the abduction carefully. This wasn't your fault. You were a normal parent at a park. Turner was a predator who specialized in exploiting brief moments of inattention. Isabel struggled with guilt nonetheless. I looked away for 2 minutes. 2 minutes to check a text message. And in those 2 minutes, a monster took my daughter. You couldn't have known, Chen said gently. Turner was skilled at what he did. He'd abducted other children using similar methods. The guilt belongs entirely to him, not to you. Amanda Torres found the days after Flight 2847 difficult to process. The incident had been intensely stressful. Realizing a child had been abducted, maintaining composure for 90 minutes while knowing a kidnapper was on her aircraft, the tension of landing and arrest, the relief of Sophie's rescue. I keep thinking about all the things that could have gone wrong, Amanda told her partner Michael a few days later. What if Sophie hadn't whispered to me during the turbulence? What if I'd dismissed her as a scared kid making up stories? What if Robert had become violent when FBI tried to arrest him? So many things could have ended tragically, but they didn't, Michael reminded her. Sophie trusted you enough to ask for help. You believed her and acted immediately. FBI arrested Turner safely. Sophie was reunited with her family. Everything went right because you did the right things at the right times. I just did my job. Flight attendants are trained to be aware of our passengers, to recognize concerning situations. How many flight attendants would have dismissed a child's whispered claim as imagination or confusion? How many would have been too uncertain to involve authorities? You took a 7-year-old seriously when she said she'd been kidnapped. That's not just training, that's trusting your instincts and caring enough to act. Amanda wondered how many other trafficking or abduction situations had occurred on flights but gone unrecognized. How many children had desperately tried to signal they needed help but been ignored or dismissed? The thought haunted her. Delta Airlines, recognizing the significance of Amanda's actions, gave her a commendation and used the incident to enhance training for all flight attendants. The airline developed a comprehensive program on recognizing human trafficking and child abduction on aircraft. Flight attendants are uniquely positioned to identify trafficking victims, the training materials explained. We see passengers in confined spaces over extended periods. We observe behavior, interactions, and warning signs that might be missed in other settings. Sophie Martinez's rescue demonstrates the critical importance of flight attendants being aware and willing to act. The training covered indicators of child abduction or trafficking. Child appears fearful. Adult speaks for child and controls their interactions. Child has no ID or documentation. Travel arrangements seem unusual. how to communicate with potentially trafficked children safely, protocols for alerting captain and authorities, understanding that interventions might be wrong but are worth making when children's safety could be at risk. Over the following year, the enhanced training led to 12 documented incidents where Delta flight attendants identified and reported suspected trafficking or abduction situations. Not all were confirmed cases, some were misunderstandings, but 3 resulted in arrests and children being rescued. Amanda's decision to believe Sophie and call FBI has had ripple effects throughout the aviation industry, said aviation safety expert Dr. Thomas Chen. Airlines now take trafficking recognition seriously. Flight attendants are being trained and empowered to intervene. That's protecting vulnerable children beyond just Sophie Martinez. Sophie Martinez's physical recovery was relatively quick. A few weeks of proper nutrition, medical care and sleep restored her health, but psychological recovery was more complex and ongoing. Sophie experienced a major trauma, abduction, days of captivity with a stranger, threats, being transported across the country against her will, explained her therapist, Dr. Jennifer Park. That creates lasting psychological impacts. She'll likely struggle with anxiety, trust issues, nightmares, and PTSD symptoms. Recovery is a long-term process. Initially, Sophie had severe anxiety. She couldn't sleep alone, had nightmares about Robert Turner, experienced panic attacks when men approached her, and was terrified of being separated from her mother even briefly. It's normal for her to feel unsafe, Dr. Park told Isabel. Her sense of security was shattered. She learned the world isn't safe, that strangers can hurt her, that she can be taken from you. Rebuilding that sense of safety takes time. Dr. Park used trauma-focused therapy specifically designed for child abduction survivors. We work on helping Sophie process what happened in age-appropriate ways. We help her understand it wasn't her fault. Turner was bad, not her. We teach coping skills for when she feels scared. We gradually rebuild her confidence and sense of autonomy. Isabel struggled with her own trauma. The 3 days of not knowing if Sophie was alive, the guilt about the abduction happening, the ongoing fear that something would happen to Sophie again. Parents of abducted children often develop their own PTSD. Dr. Park explained, you experience trauma too. You need your own therapy and support to process what happened and manage your understandable anxiety about Sophie's safety. Isabel joined a support group for parents of abducted children. Hearing others' experiences, the guilt, the nightmares, the hypervigilance about their children's safety, helped her understand she wasn't alone or overreacting. I watch Sophie constantly now, Isabel admitted to the group. At the park, at school, everywhere. I panic if I can't see her for even a second. I know it's not healthy, but I can't help it. I lost her once. I can't lose her again. The group facilitator helped parents understand that protective hypervigilance was normal after trauma, but needed to be gradually reduced so children could develop appropriate independence. Your fear is understandable, but if Sophie never has age-appropriate freedom because you're too terrified to let her out of your sight, the trauma continues affecting her life. We need to find balance between reasonable safety and allowing her to be a child. Slowly, with therapy and support, both Sophie and Isabel healed. The nightmares became less frequent. Sophie's anxiety decreased. She was able to return to school, play with friends, and gradually reclaim the childhood that Turner had tried to steal. I still get scared sometimes, Sophie told Dr. Park during a session 6 months after her rescue. But I remember that most grown-ups are good. Miss Amanda was good. The FBI man was good. My teacher is good. Robert was bad, but he's in jail now and can't hurt me. That's exactly right, Dr. Park affirmed. Most people are safe. What happened with Robert was rare and not your fault. You were smart and brave to ask for help. You survived something terrible and you're becoming strong again. By Sophie's 8th birthday, 8 months after her rescue, she was doing remarkably well. She still had moments of fear and needed ongoing therapy, but she was thriving in school, had friends, enjoyed playing soccer, and was slowly rebuilding the sense of security that Turner had shattered. Sophie is resilient, Dr. Park told Isabel. Children often are with proper support. She'll carry this experience with her always, but it doesn't have to define her entire life. With continued therapy and your love and support, she can heal and build a good life. Robert Turner's trial began 11 months after Sophie's rescue. He'd already pleaded guilty to federal kidnapping charges in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, but the trial was necessary to establish the full scope of his crimes and connections to the trafficking network. Sophie didn't have to testify in person. Her videotaped forensic interview was entered as evidence instead. The prosecutors didn't want to re-traumatize her by forcing her to face Turner in court. But Amanda Torres did testify. She described Sophie's whispered disclosure during the turbulence, her observations of Sophie's fearful behavior and Turner's controlling demeanor, and the immediate actions she'd taken to alert the captain and ensure Sophie's safety. Why did you believe Sophie? The prosecutor asked. She was 7 years old making an extraordinary claim. Many adults might have dismissed it, because I looked at her face and I saw genuine terror, Amanda said. I saw a child desperately asking for help. And her behavior throughout the flight, the fear, the way she shrank away from Turner, the way she never interacted with him like a daughter with a father, everything supported what she'd told me.
I trusted my instincts that this child was in danger and needed immediate intervention. The defense attorney tried to suggest Amanda had misinterpreted an innocent situation, that Sophie was just a nervous child and Turner was a caring father. But Amanda was firm. "Sir, I've been a flight attendant for 9 years. I've seen thousands of children traveling with parents. I know what normal parent-child interactions look like. This wasn't that." Sophie was terrified. She explicitly told me she'd been kidnapped. She gave me specific details, Turner's name, that she'd been taken from a park, that she wanted her mother. That's not a nervous child's imagination. That's a kidnapped child asking for help. Captain Steve Morrison testified about receiving Amanda's report and making the immediate decision to alert authorities. "When a flight attendant I trust tells me a child has disclosed kidnapping, I take that seriously. We contacted FBI immediately and coordinated to ensure the child's safety and the suspect's arrest." FBI agent Marcus Chen testified about the investigation, Turner's confirmed connection to a child exploitation network, and the other victims who'd been identified through Turner's cooperation and evidence from his devices. Robert Turner wasn't just a one-time abductor, Chen explained to the jury. He was part of an organized criminal network that systematically trafficked children for sexual exploitation. Sophie Martinez was targeted, abducted, and being transported to be sold into this network. If Amanda Torres hadn't recognized the situation, and if we hadn't been able to intervene on that aircraft, Sophie would have disappeared into a nightmare of ongoing abuse. Many other children weren't as lucky. They were successfully trafficked and suffered for months or years before being recovered, if they were recovered at all. The evidence against Turner was overwhelming. Beyond Sophie's testimony, prosecutors presented raw surveillance footage from the Seattle park showing Turner watching Sophie in the days before her abduction, witness testimony from park visitors who'd seen Turner approach Sophie, evidence from Turner's phone and computer showing his involvement in the trafficking network, testimony from other rescued victims about the network's operations, financial records showing payments Turner received for acquiring children. Turner's defense was essentially non-existent. His attorney could only argue for leniency based on his cooperation with investigators, but even that rang hollow given the severity of his crimes. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts: kidnapping, attempted child trafficking, conspiracy to commit child exploitation, and multiple other charges. At sentencing, Isabel Martinez provided a victim impact statement on behalf of Sophie. "Robert Turner stole my 7-year-old daughter from a park. For 3 days I didn't know if she was alive or dead. For 3 days Sophie was with a monster who planned to sell her into abuse and exploitation. My daughter will carry the trauma of those 3 days for the rest of her life. She has nightmares. She's terrified of strangers. She struggles to feel safe." Turner tried to destroy her childhood and very nearly succeeded. But Sophie survived because she was brave enough to ask for help, and because a flight attendant believed her. Sophie is healing. She's strong, she's resilient, and Turner is going to prison for the rest of his life knowing that his plan failed. "My daughter is free and safe. He'll never hurt her or any other child again. That's justice." Judge Patricia Morrison sentenced Robert Turner to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, plus an additional 60 years for related charges. "Mr. Turner, you are a predator who targeted innocent children," Morrison said. "You abducted Sophie Martinez with the intent to sell her to be sexually exploited. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the tremendous harm you've caused. You participated in a network that destroyed children's lives. You deserve every single day of the life sentence you're receiving. You'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison, and society will be safer for it." Turner showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He was led out of the courtroom in shackles, and Sophie Martinez was finally completely free of him. Sophie Martinez's case, because it had occurred on a commercial flight and involved a flight attendant's intervention, received significant media attention. The story resonated with the public. A child abduction recognized and stopped because one observant flight attendant believed a 7-year-old's whispered plea. "Flight attendant's quick action saves kidnapped child," read headlines across the country. News coverage highlighted Amanda's recognition of warning signs, her immediate response, and the successful coordination between airline crew and FBI that resulted in Sophie's rescue. The case sparked national conversations about aviation industry's role in combating trafficking. Airlines recognized they had opportunities and responsibilities to identify trafficking victims. The Aviation Industry Against Human Trafficking Coalition was formed, bringing together airlines, airports, and aviation workers to develop comprehensive anti-trafficking protocols. Flight attendants, gate agents, ticket counter staff, we all interact with passengers in ways that could reveal trafficking situations, said coalition spokesperson Maria Rodriguez. Sophie's rescue demonstrates that aviation workers, when properly trained, can identify and report trafficking and abduction. We need industry-wide commitment to this mission. Within 2 years, all major U.S. airlines had implemented mandatory trafficking awareness training for flight attendants and other customer-facing staff. The training covered recognizing signs of trafficking, fearful or submissive passengers, lack of control over ID/money, scripted responses, physical indicators of abuse, special focus on children traveling with with non-relatives or in suspicious circumstances, how to engage with potential victims safely, reporting protocols and coordination with law enforcement, understanding that false alarms are acceptable when children's safety is at risk. Child safety education. Sophie's rescue highlighted the importance of teaching children how to seek help when in danger. Schools across the country enhanced their safety curricula, teaching children, it's okay to say no to adults who make them uncomfortable. They should tell trusted adults if someone tries to take them or hurts them. If they're ever in danger, they should look for safe adults to ask for help. Tricky people aren't always obviously scary. They can seem nice, which is why children should always tell parents before going anywhere with someone. Sophie saved herself by remembering her mother's advice to ask a grown-up for help when in trouble, said child safety expert Dr. Sarah Williams. We need to teach all children that it's okay to speak up, that adults will believe them, and that asking for help isn't tattling, it's survival. Mandatory reporting and believing children. The case reinforced the importance of adults taking children's disclosures seriously. Child protection advocates used Sophie's story to train professionals on believing children when they report abuse or danger. Amanda Torres believed Sophie immediately when she said she'd been kidnapped, explained Child Protective Services trainer James Thompson. She didn't dismiss it as fantasy or overreaction. She recognized that children rarely make false claims about being in danger. That belief saved Sophie's life. We need all adults, teachers, doctors, social workers, any professional working with children, to have that same instinct to believe and act when a child discloses harm. Airport security protocols. Airports enhance protocols for identifying potential trafficking situations. Security personnel received training on recognizing trafficking indicators and were given clear procedures for reporting concerns and coordinating with law enforcement. We've always focused on terrorism and smuggling, acknowledged a TSA official, but human trafficking, including child abduction, happens in our airports too. We need security personnel who are trained to recognize it and empowered to intervene. Amanda Torres found herself unexpectedly becoming a national voice on aviation industry anti-trafficking efforts. Delta Airlines promoted her to a corporate position developing and delivering training programs for all Delta flight attendants. I never imagined Sophie's rescue would lead to this. Amanda told colleagues, I was just a flight attendant doing my job, but I've realized that experience can be used to help protect other vulnerable passengers. If sharing Sophie's story and teaching other flight attendants to recognize trafficking indicators can save even one more person, it's worthwhile. Amanda developed comprehensive training modules covering real-world case studies, including Sophie's case, with permission, trafficking indicators specific to aviation settings, how to assess situations quickly during flights, communication techniques for engaging with potential victims, de-escalation strategies if traffickers become aware of intervention, coordination protocols with flight crew and law enforcement, self-care for flight attendants dealing with traumatic situations. Flight attendants are not law enforcement, Amanda emphasized in training. We're not investigators, but we're observers. We see passengers for hours in confined spaces. We notice behavior. We have opportunities to identify people in danger. With proper training, we become a layer of protection for vulnerable travelers. Over 5 years, Amanda trained over 15,000 Delta flight attendants and consulted with other airlines implementing similar programs. Her training led to documented interventions where flight attendants identified 33 suspected child trafficking situations, 14 confirmed after investigation, 8 child abduction situations similar to Sophie's, all confirmed, multiple domestic violence and coercion situations. Not every suspected case turns out to be trafficking, Amanda acknowledged. Sometimes situations that look concerning are actually innocent, but I'd rather have flight attendants report 100 situations where 95 turn out to be fine than have them ignore the 5 where someone desperately needs help. The cost of a false alarm is minimal. The cost of missing a real trafficking victim is a destroyed life. Amanda also became involved with anti-trafficking organizations beyond aviation, speaking at conferences, consulting on training programs, and advocating for policies supporting trafficking survivors. Sophie's case taught me that ordinary people in ordinary jobs can make extraordinary differences, Amanda told a conference audience. I'm a flight attendant. I serve drinks and ensure safety, but because I paid attention and trusted my instincts when a child asked for help, I was able to save her from a nightmare. Everyone has that same potential to notice when something's wrong and act on it. That's how we protect vulnerable people. Sophie Martinez and Amanda Torres maintained contact over the years, developing a relationship that transcended the trauma that had brought them together. With Isabel's permission and guidance from Sophie's therapist, Amanda would visit Sophie periodically, and they'd exchange letters and video calls. Amanda is part of Sophie's healing story, Dr. Park explained to Isabel. She represents the good that came from a terrible situation. She's proof that there are adults who protect children, who believe them, who help them. That's an important narrative for Sophie's recovery. When Sophie turned 10, 3 years after her rescue, she wrote Amanda a letter for Amanda's birthday. Dear Miss Amanda, Thank you for saving me when I was 7. I'm 10 now, and I'm doing really good. I don't have nightmares as much anymore. I have lots of friends, and I like school. I play soccer, and I'm getting pretty good at it. Mom says you believed me when I told you about Robert taking me. She says a lot of grown-ups might not have believed a little kid, but you did. That's why I'm here and safe now. You're my hero. I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to help kids who are scared and in trouble. Maybe I'll be a police officer or a social worker or something like that. I want to protect kids like you protected me. Thank you for being such a good person. I'm glad you were my flight attendant that day. Love, Sophie. Amanda cried reading the letter. 3 years after that terrifying flight, Sophie was thriving, playing soccer, doing well in school, thinking about her future. The 7-year-old who'd whispered a desperate plea for help was now a confident 10-year-old with dreams and plans. I keep this letter with me when I travel, Amanda told Michael. On difficult days when I'm exhausted from work or dealing with challenging passengers, I remember why this job matters. I remember that paying attention and caring about the people I serve can literally save lives. Sophie reminds me of that. For Sophie's 13th birthday, Amanda was invited to the celebration. It was a typical teenage party. Pizza, movies, friends giggling and taking selfies. Sophie was a normal 13-year-old, dealing with normal teenage concerns about school, friends, and fitting in. Sophie's doing so well, Isabel told Amanda during the party. She still has moments. Certain situations trigger anxiety. She's cautious around strange men, but overall, she's healed remarkably. She's a happy, healthy teenager. That's because of you, Amanda. You gave her the chance to grow up. She gave herself that chance by being brave enough to ask for help, Amanda said. I just listened and acted, but I'm so grateful I was there for her when she needed someone. Sophie, now comfortable and confident, in a way 7-year-old Sophie couldn't have imagined, approached Amanda and hugged her. Thanks for coming, Miss Amanda. It means a lot that you're here. I wouldn't miss it, Sophie. I'm so proud of who you're becoming.
15 years after Flight 2847, Amanda Torres, now 47, and Sophie Martinez, now 22 and in her final year of college, studying social work, reunited at a conference on combating human trafficking. Both were presenting, Amanda about aviation industry anti-trafficking efforts, Sophie about her experience as a survivor and her work supporting other trafficking victims. 15 years ago, I was a terrified 7-year-old who'd been kidnapped and was being flown across the country by my abductor, Sophie told the conference audience. I was certain I'd never see my family again, but during turbulence on that flight, I found courage to whisper to a flight attendant that I needed help. And that flight attendant, Amanda Torres, believed me immediately. She recognized I was in danger and took action that saved my life. Sophie described the 3 days of captivity with Robert Turner, the terror of not knowing what would happen to her, the moment she decided to risk asking Amanda for help, and the overwhelming relief when FBI arrested Turner and reunited her with her mother. I'm 22 now. I'm graduating college in a few months. I'm engaged to a wonderful man. I'm planning a career helping trafficking survivors. I have a good life, a life I wouldn't have if Amanda hadn't paid attention and acted when I asked for help. She looked at Amanda, who was sitting in the audience with tears streaming down her face. Amanda taught me that there are good adults who protect children. That lesson has shaped my entire recovery in my life. I went from being a victim to being a survivor to being an advocate. That journey was only possible because someone believed me and saved me. Amanda presented after Sophie, sharing the story from her perspective. The moment Sophie whispered her plea, the realization of what was happening, the terrifying 90 minutes maintaining normalcy while knowing a kidnapper was on her aircraft, the relief of Sophie's safe rescue. Sophie was incredibly brave, Amanda told the audience. She found a way to ask for help despite being terrified. My role was simpler. I just had to believe a child and make a phone call. But that experience taught me that ordinary people in ordinary jobs can save lives. Flight attendants, teachers, doctors, store clerks, anyone who interacts with the public. We all have opportunities to notice when someone needs help. The question is whether we pay attention and whether we act. She discussed the 15 years of training programs, policy changes, and documented interventions that had grown from Sophie's case. Hundreds of trafficking victims have been identified on aircraft because flight attendants were trained to recognize warning signs and empowered to report concerns. That training exists because of Sophie, because her rescue demonstrated both the need for such training and its effectiveness when implemented. After their presentations, Amanda and Sophie sat together for an interview with a journalist writing about the case's 15th anniversary. "What's your relationship like now?" the journalist asked. Sophie answered first. "Amanda is family. She's not just the person who saved me. She's someone who's been part of my life for 15 years. She came to my middle school graduation, my high school graduation, and she'll be at my college graduation next year. She's been a constant source of support and inspiration. And I've watched Sophie transform from a traumatized 7-year-old to this confident, accomplished young woman, Amanda added. She's overcome tremendous trauma and used her experience to help others. I'm incredibly proud of her. Sophie, what do you remember about that moment during Turbulence when you decided to tell Amanda? I remember being absolutely terrified, Sophie said. Robert had threatened that if I told anyone, he'd hurt my mom and grandma, but I was also desperate. I'd been with him for 3 days and I didn't know what would happen to me. When the plane started shaking during Turbulence and Amanda walked by my seat, something just clicked. I thought, this is my chance. I have to try. So I reached out and whispered to her, and she leaned down and listened. That's the moment everything changed. Amanda, what made you believe Sophie? Her eyes, Amanda said immediately. When I looked at her face after she whispered to me, I saw genuine terror and desperate hope. That's not something a child can fake. And everything I'd observed about her behavior throughout the flight, the fear, the way she shrank away from Turner, the lack of any normal parent-child interaction, supported what she'd told me. My instincts screamed that this child was in danger. I had to act. What would you say to other flight attendants or professionals who might encounter similar situations? Amanda leaned forward. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. If a child tells you they're in danger, believe them. Children rarely make false claims about being harmed or threatened. Your intervention might be wrong, the situation might be innocent, but that's okay. Better to report 10 situations where 9 are misunderstandings than ignore the one where someone desperately needs help. Don't be afraid to get involved, Sophie added. And for kids who might be in danger, it's okay to ask for help. Find an adult you trust and tell them what's happening. Adults want to protect you. I know it's scary, especially if someone has threatened you, but there are good grown-ups who will believe you and help you. I'm alive and safe because I found the courage to whisper for help. You can do that too. 20 years after Flight 284-7, the ripples from Amanda's intervention continued spreading in ways neither she nor Sophie could have initially imagined. The aviation industry's anti-trafficking programs had matured into sophisticated, comprehensive systems. All major U.S. airlines required annual trafficking awareness training for customer-facing staff. Airports had dedicated human trafficking response teams coordinating with law enforcement. Airline Ambassadors International trained flight crews specifically for identifying and assisting trafficking victims. Technology solutions helped flag suspicious booking patterns that might indicate trafficking. Over 2 decades, these programs led to thousands of interventions, with hundreds confirmed as legitimate trafficking situations. Exact numbers were impossible to calculate. Many interventions happened quietly, victims were helped without public awareness, and the preventive effect of traffickers avoiding airlines they knew were vigilant was unmeasurable. Sophie's rescue was a watershed moment, said aviation security expert Dr. Robert Morrison. It demonstrated that trafficking happens on commercial flights and that flight attendants can identify it. The industry responded by making anti-trafficking efforts a core component of flight attendant training. That cultural shift has protected countless vulnerable passengers over 20 years. The case had also influenced broader anti-trafficking work beyond aviation. Hotels, restaurants, and other hospitality businesses implemented similar training. Schools taught children about recognizing unsafe situations and asking for help. Law enforcement improved coordination on trafficking cases. Public awareness increased dramatically about trafficking indicators. Funding for victim services expanded. Amanda Torres, now 52, had become a nationally recognized expert on human trafficking in commercial aviation. She'd written a book, 35,000 Feet, How Flight Attendants Combat Human Trafficking, which was used in training programs internationally. She consulted with airlines, law enforcement, and anti-trafficking organizations worldwide. That Tuesday afternoon 20 years ago changed the trajectory of my entire life, Amanda reflected in an interview. I was a flight attendant doing routine work. Then Sophie whispered her plea and suddenly I was responsible for a child's life. That moment taught me that ordinary work can have extraordinary meaning. Every interaction matters. Every passenger could be someone who needs help. Paying attention isn't just good customer service, it's potentially life-saving vigilance. Sophie Martinez, now 27, had completed her Master of Social Work and was working as a therapist specializing in trafficking and abduction survivors. She brought both professional training and lived experience to her work. I understand what my clients are experiencing in ways therapists who haven't been trafficked can't, Sophie told colleagues. I know the terror, the helplessness, the difficulty trusting adults afterward, the shame and trauma, but I also know that recovery is possible. I'm living proof. I was kidnapped at 7 and traumatized, but with proper support I healed. I'm thriving. I'm helping others. That's the message I give every survivor. What happened to you was terrible, but it doesn't have to destroy your entire life. Sophie had also become an advocate and public speaker, sharing her story to raise awareness and help prevent other abductions. She spoke at schools,
conferences, and community events, teaching children about safety and teaching adults about believing and protecting children. If sharing my story prevents even one child from being abducted, or helps one adult recognize warning signs and intervene, then revisiting my trauma is worthwhile, Sophie said. I've transformed my victimization into purpose. That's healing, using your worst experience to help others avoid or survive similar experiences. Sophie had married her college boyfriend, David, 3 years ago. They were expecting their first child, a daughter they planned to name Amanda, after the woman who'd saved Sophie's life. I want my daughter to know the story of how Aunt Amanda saved her mommy, Sophie told Amanda when sharing the pregnancy news. I want her to grow up understanding that there are good people who protect children, and that if she's ever in trouble, there are adults she can trust to help her. Amanda cried hearing this. I'm honored beyond words, Sophie. Knowing you've built this beautiful life, marriage, career, now a baby. That's the best possible outcome from that terrible situation. You didn't just survive, you thrived. Despite 2 decades of progress, human trafficking remained a massive global problem. The UN estimated 25 million people were being trafficked worldwide, including millions of children. The US alone had hundreds of thousands of trafficking victims. We've made progress, acknowledged anti-trafficking expert Dr. Jennifer Park. Awareness has increased. Training programs are widespread. We're identifying and helping more victims. But trafficking is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry. For every Sophie we rescue, there are many others who aren't identified, or aren't as fortunate. This isn't a problem we've solved. It's an ongoing battle requiring sustained commitment. New challenges had emerged over 20 years. Online recruitment made identifying trafficking more difficult. Traffickers adapted tactics to avoid detection. The COVID-19 pandemic had increased vulnerability and isolation. Demand for commercial sex and exploited labor continued fueling trafficking. International coordination remained inadequate. Sophie's rescue happened because multiple things went right. She found courage to ask for help. Amanda recognized the situation. Airline crew responded properly. FBI coordinated effectively. Dr. Park explained. But that alignment doesn't always occur. Many victims can't or don't disclose. Many situations aren't recognized. Many reports aren't investigated adequately. We need better systems, more resources, and continued vigilance. Amanda acknowledged these realities in her training work. I tell flight attendants that we're not going to end trafficking by ourselves, but we can be one layer of protection. We can identify some victims. We can disrupt some trafficking operations. We can make it harder for traffickers to operate. That's valuable even if it's not comprehensive. Sophie similarly recognized that her advocacy work was one piece of a larger puzzle. I share my story to raise awareness and teach prevention. I provide therapy to help survivors heal, but I'm one person helping individuals. We also need systemic change, addressing poverty, inequality, lack of opportunity that make people vulnerable to trafficking. We need strong laws and adequate enforcement. We need a culture that doesn't tolerate exploitation, that requires collective action beyond what I can do individually. On the 20th anniversary of Flight 2, the event, held at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the destination of that fateful flight, brought together the key figures: Amanda, now 52, Sophie, 27, Sophie's mother Isabel and grandmother Rosa, Captain Steve Morrison, now retired, FBI agent Marcus Chen, now retired, and dozens of flight attendants who'd been trained by Amanda and had identified trafficking situations on their own flights. 20 years ago today, Flight 284-7 landed at this airport with a kidnapped child and her abductor on board, Delta's CEO told the gathered audience. Because flight attendant Amanda Torres believed a 7-year-old's whispered plea and took immediate action, that child was rescued and her kidnapper arrested. But the impact didn't stop there. Amanda's intervention inspired a complete rethinking of how the aviation industry approaches human trafficking. Today, 20 years later, anti-trafficking training is standard for flight attendants industry-wide. Hundreds of victims have been identified and helped because aviation workers were trained to recognize trafficking indicators. That legacy traces directly to Amanda's decision to believe Sophie and act. Amanda spoke about the 20 years since that flight. When Sophie whispered to me during Turbulence, I was just trying to get through a difficult patch of weather. I had no idea that moment would define the rest of my career and life. But saving Sophie taught me that paying attention and acting on instincts when someone needs help is perhaps the most important thing any of us can do. All the training programs, all the policies, all the interventions over 20 years, they all grew from one decision: to believe a child and call for help. Sophie, now visibly pregnant with the daughter she'd soon name Amanda, spoke about her journey from victim to survivor to advocate. 20 years ago, I was 7 years old and absolutely terrified. A predator had taken me and was transporting me to a nightmare I can't even fully imagine. But I found courage to ask for help, and Amanda gave me a chance to have a life. Everything I am, my education, my career, my marriage, the baby I'm about to have, exists because Amanda believed me and saved me. She looked at her mother, who was crying. "Mom, I know you carried guilt for years about the 2 minutes you looked away at the park, but what happened wasn't your fault. Robert Turner was a professional predator who targeted me deliberately. You raised me to ask adults for help when in trouble. That advice is what saved me. You gave me the tools to survive." Sophie turned to Amanda. "And you, Miss Amanda? You've been in my life for 20 years now. You were there for my middle school graduation, my high school graduation, my college graduation. You were at my wedding. You're about to be at my baby's birth, because I'm naming her after you. You're not just the person who saved me once. You're family. You're a constant source of inspiration. You showed me that there are good people who protect children, and that lesson shaped my entire recovery and my life's work." Amanda and Sophie embraced, both crying, surrounded by the community of people whose lives had been touched by that moment 20 years ago. A whispered plea, a decision to believe, a phone call that changed everything. The event concluded with the unveiling of a plaque at the airport, in recognition of flight attendant Amanda Torres and the rescue of Sophie Martinez on Flight 28047, June 15, 2005. Amanda's vigilance and courage in believing a child's cry for help inspired 2 decades of aviation industry anti-trafficking efforts that have protected countless vulnerable passengers. May we all have the awareness to notice when someone needs help and the courage to act. As the ceremony ended, Sophie and Amanda stood together, looking at the plaque, reflecting on 20 years since their lives had intersected in crisis. 20 years, Sophie said, her hand on her pregnant belly. "I was 7. I'm 27 now. I've lived almost 3/4 of my life since you saved me. All my adult years, all my achievements, my entire future, including this baby, exist because of you. You made it possible for me to save you," Amanda replied. "You found the courage to ask for help despite being terrified. That took incredible bravery. I just listened and acted. The courage was yours, Sophie. We both did what we needed to do," Sophie said. "Me asking, you listening. That combination is what saved me, and that's the lesson I hope people take from our story. Vulnerable people ask for help in whatever ways they can, and others need to pay attention and respond. That connection between asking and listening is what saves lives."
Amanda nodded. 20 years of training, hundreds of interventions, countless lives protected. It all traces back to one moment of connection. You asking for help, and me choosing to believe and act. That's powerful. That's what changes the world. Ordinary people in ordinary moments doing the right thing. They stood in comfortable silence, 2 women bound by one whispered plea, 20 years ago, and by a friendship forged in crisis that had endured across 2 decades. A 7-year-old's desperate whisper, a flight attendant's decision to believe and act, one moment that became a movement, one intervention that saved a life and inspired a generation of protections for vulnerable passengers. 20 years, one flight, one whispered plea during turbulence, one woman who listened and believed, one phone call that changed everything, one life saved that day, hundreds more in the years since. An industry transformed, awareness raised, policies changed, a culture of vigilance created, one child's desperate courage, one adult's protective action, one moment that became an enduring legacy. That was always enough, more than enough, everything. This story is dedicated to every flight attendant, transportation worker, teacher, and citizen who pays attention to the people around them, believes when someone, especially a child, asks for help, and has the courage to act when intervention is needed. Your vigilance protects the vulnerable. And to every child in danger, there are adults who will believe you, who will help you, who will protect you. Find your voice. Ask for help. Someone is listening.
Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.